Hi, everyone. This is Leisa Grace, and welcome to the Teach Middle East podcast. Today, I am chatting with John Tomsett. He's an author, former school leader, and we're going to be looking at putting staff first in schools. We always hear about putting the students first, but we're going to find out what Tom's blueprint is about, because his book is about a blueprint for revitalizing schools, and he says we can do that by putting staff first.
You are listening to the Teach Middle East podcast, connecting, developing, and empowering educators.
Welcome to the podcast, John.
I'm delighted to be here, Lisa. Thanks for asking me.
I'm sure just now I made a mistake on your name. I called you Tom.
People do all the time, don't worry.
And I don't know why. It's John.
Because of Tom Sherrington, John Tomsett. I had an Uncle Tom Tomsett. So yeah, it's a common mistake. Don't worry.
If you're listening, guys, what can I say?
Don't worry.
Slip of the tongue. John, introduce yourself first, please.
Hi, yeah. So I'm John Tomsett. I taught for 33 years, from 1998 to 2021. I was head teacher at Lady Lumley School in Pickering for 4 years, and then at Huntington School in York in the UK for 14 years, one of the first research schools. I worked closely with, I appointed Alex Quigley, who you may have heard of, who's written lots of books on literacy, to be our research lead. We were one of the first research schools in the country, and I've been fortunate enough since 2021 to work with people like Mary Myatt, Tom Sherrington, Stephen Tierney, Vic Goddard, and just talking, writing, speaking, and trying to, in a very humble way, pass on what modicum of wisdom I might have gained in 33 years of teaching. I was a teaching head teacher, so I taught every year for 33 years. I think that's really important. And I would argue that for the first 25 years of a 33-year career, I didn't really know what I was doing. I got by on force of character and enthusiasm, but it was in the last decade or so where we became a research-enhanced and evidence-informed school that I really started to teach better. I ironically I ended my career a better teacher than I was a decade ago. So it's been really interesting, and I've had such a lovely time in the last 2 years, having stepped down from headship in 2021, having led the school through the pandemic, just trying to help people get better.
Yeah. You said something that I want to ask. Why should head teachers teach?
Why should head teachers teach? There are lots of different models now, but if you're going to be a head teacher rather than head administrator, you've got to know your staff, right? You've got to know what you're talking about. You've got to cut the mustard in the classroom, right? You can't be a head teacher and lead teaching and learning if you don't understand fundamentally the nuances of and how damned hard it is to teach and what a complex process it is for children to learn. So I think that's why, really. And one of the key things is that if you teach, you understand the barriers that get in the way of process. So I remember people were moaning about our MIS, and I only taught 3 lessons a week, goodness me, but I taught Year 9 English, and it was taking me 15 clicks to get to the register at the beginning of the lesson, right? Now, if I was teaching 5 lessons a day, that's 75 clicks before I even got to take the register. So we got a new MIS because I realized that was getting in the way. So I see headship. I see my role as a head, always saw my role as a head, was to remove all the barriers I could to enable people who are expert at the job to do the job, a complex job. I had to make it as simple as possible for them to do that complex job of teaching. Remove all the barriers, because we taught 1,996 lessons a week, and I taught 3 of them. So I had to make sure the other 1,993 were taught really well. And the only way to do that is to make sure I had the best staff possible and remove all the barriers for them.
Yeah. I wonder as well why more head teachers don't teach, because I think you made really good point of keeping your finger on the pulse. If I'm in the classroom and I know what the barriers are that my teachers are facing, then I'll be able to better remove those barriers.
Exactly.
Why are more head teachers not doing it, you think?
There's so much of what I've written in books, It's just damn common sense, really. It's just basic common sense. And I do get saddened by some of the simplicity of what I profess. I get saddened by people's response to it because it is really simple. It's complex and simple, and we can investigate that as we go through the conversation.
But simple is not easy, right? They're definitely two different things.
No, completely.
So you might say, oh, it's simple, but it could be very difficult for someone to implement.
Oh, completely. But it's also accepting some premises that are very simple premises. So, for instance, I had a conversation with Richard Sheriff just before the lockdown. Richard Sheriff is the head of Red Kite Alliance over in Harrogate. He was the president of ASCL in the UK. That's the Association of School and College Leaders. He's a big cheese in the education world. He'd come over to see me. We were chatting in my office. And I said, well, the thing is, Richard, I don't know how we got onto it. I said, we only have one objective for performance management. That's to become a better teacher. And he said, well, you've got to have three. I said, no, we've only got one objective and no one's died. It's okay. I promise you. And, you spend hours and hours and hours of your life as a head teacher sorting out performance management. And if it's not improving the quality of teaching, don't do it, right? Just don't do it. If it's not improving teaching and learning curriculum, forget it, right? So if you start having those principles, what do you want out of a performance management system? For people to become better teachers. Okay, so construct it so that's what happens, if that's what you want. But having three objectives that people scramble around to find at the beginning of September and pretend they've met isn't helping anybody.
I had this similar conversation with Mary Myatt when we talked about decluttering education. And we talked about the fact that we do some strange things in education without any kind of rationale. Why do we have to have three objectives on our performance management? Why, when we write our CEF, do we need to go dig and really find faults where there are none?
So the CEF is fascinating. So another example, a great example is the CEF. So in about 2014, I said to our governing body, look, the CEF, why don't I just give you a one-page summary of the CEF rather than keep giving you the CEF? So I said, okay, that sounds like a good idea. So I just gave them a one-page summary and chopped the CEF away. Right? So there was no CEF. So when we got inspected in 2017, it literally was one side of a paper. And we got graded outstanding by Ofsted in 2017. So you don't need that stuff, I don't
know. Where did we get it, though? I'm sorry. I know we're completely not talking about the book. I told you this would happen. But my listeners know me, so they know it would have happened anyway.
But it is a part of the thing, isn't it? Right. So if I'm putting stuff first, one of the things you do is remove all the rubbish from their lives, right? So I'm a bit obsessed with time. I always have been since I was very young. And I got, in the last decade of my career, I asked two questions. The first question was, here's what I'm asking people to do, improve the quality of teaching and learning. And I include curriculum within that because that's all part as one. And if it was something that was helping improve the quality of teaching and learning, I would ask the second question, okay, is there something that I could ask them to do that would improve it even more? Because you can only spend that 1 hour once, right? You can only spend it once. So make sure you're asking them to do stuff that's really, really important. Although, don't do any assessment or submit any data if you're doing nothing with it. I'm not interested, right? Don't do it for me as a head. Don't do it for governors. Do it to inform the next stage of your teaching and learning, right? That's the only thing that you should do with data. Honestly, there's so much stuff that I think is pretty much common sense and people find quite difficult to accept.
I love the fact that you made yourself a one-pager. Do you know how much I've dreamed of that? I taught in the UK for several years and then became an assistant head. And the more I climbed is the more paperwork I found. And the higher is the greater the paperwork became. And I thought, there is just no reason for a lot of this. There isn't.
No.
And when I moved overseas, I realized something. Do you know that here in the Middle East, the parts of the education system that we complained about so much in the UK is what a lot of international schools have adopted? So they have a binder full of paperwork, CEFs and SIPs and professional development plans, oodles of them. And how much of them are being utilized? Not that many, for it to be honest.
No.
But I want to get back on track in terms of putting staff first and talking about why we should prioritize well-being. So can you talk to me about the key catalysts that led you to the perspective you have right now on why it's so important to put staff first?
Okay, so it goes back a long way, really. I was a deputy at Huntington in New York from 98 to 2003. And then in that stage, it was quite an attritional place, right? So it was really hard-nosed approach to managing people. It wasn't the happiest of places, but it was successful because it was, it was real rigor, et cetera, et cetera. And I went off to be a head teacher at Lady Lumley's, and I replicated some of what I'd seen, and it didn't work. So I thought this approach to managing people and leading schools is not transferable, right? So culturally, it was completely different. So I went from a culture where there was kind of Huntington, there was real rigor and good outcomes, but it's quite miserable, to a place that felt really nice and comfortable, and people, on the surface got on well, but the results weren't very good at all. It was a bit of coasting. So I always thought in my life that you could have a place that has high expectations, great results, and a great place to work and learn that people would enjoy going to. Those two things weren't mutually exclusive. In fact, I thought they were absolutely inextricably linked. If you get both right. So I always thought that if you get the culture right, then the great results are a byproduct of the culture of the school, right? But getting that culture right is a tricky thing, right? So I really like Collins's phrase where he was asked once, he did the book Good to Great, he was asked once what he thought of all the aptitudes and dispositions of a leader, which is the most important. And he said willful humility. He said where a leader has the willful drive to do the best thing ever for the institution, to be the best it can possibly be, but in a way that takes no credit, passes all the credit on to the other staff and the people that made it happen. And I think that was a real driver for me. So I learned in 4 years away from Huntington that actually fear doesn't do anybody any good, and fear only gets you so far. And then when I came back to Huntington, this is really interesting. I came back to Huntington and the students were in the middle. I came back in June just to meet the students. I began in September of 2007. And the students had just been on the end of what was called an orange card campaign. Apparently they weren't behaving very well. So the head decided that every child would be issued with an orange card. And if they were remotely rude or transgressed in any way, the teacher signed it, and then they lost their breaks and lunchtimes for a fortnight. One striking out. So when I met the students, I said, Sir, please get rid of the orange card campaign. It's horrible, it's horrible, it's horrible. So I'd been there, started in September, been there the following June, so a year from that conversation with the children, staff were asking for another orange card campaign. So I thought about it, and I stood in front of the whole staff, and I said, look, we are not having a second orange card campaign for two reasons. The first reason is, if they worked, you wouldn't need a second one. And the second reason is, it's not the kind of institution I want to create. So we're going to have an SLT celebration fortnight. So we're going to come into classrooms and we're going to ask you to tell us about a student or students in the room who've done brilliant work, and we're going to celebrate how brilliant they are. And I said that because that's the school we're going to create. And it was a buttock clenching moment because he's standing in front of the whole staff. We're all baying for an orange card campaign. And I did the opposite. And when we reviewed that, 75% of staff wanted the SLT celebration fortnight to continue. And that was a turning point moment in the school where we were going to leave the climate of fear behind. And then 2010 came along. Our results weren't so good. I probably took my eye off the ball a little bit. Alex and I got together and we started thinking hard about how to improve the school for real. Another seminal moment was when in January 2010, we were talking to some recalcitrant Year 11 boys, about why their mocks were so bad. And they said to me, well, the thing is, sir, we're really looking forward to the extra revision lessons and you making us go to them. And we unpicked that. And what it really meant was we're going to muck about in lessons all the time and think that 10 1 hours after school on a Wednesday for the last 10 weeks before the exams is going to make up for 2 years of mucking about. So we said to staff, no extra lessons. You don't have to do any revision sessions after school. Just want you to teach really good lessons, right? That's all we want. And our results got better and better and better and better, right? And then 2015, I've been writing this blog, and then I was having dinner with Fiona Miller, who writes for the Guardian newspaper, used to write for the Guardian newspaper. And she'd just been speaking at the Minster. So I was having dinner with her, Leo Winkley, the head of St. Peter's, and a couple of the clergy from the Minster. And I was saying, look, I've got this new book coming out. It's going to be called Why the Head Teacher Should Be the Best Teacher in the School. We were chatting away, and I said, look, one of the things I say in the book is we've got to remove the fear from the corridors and the classrooms of school. Children are scared. Teachers are fearful, in the Ofsted regime and everything. Got to get rid of it. And one of the clergy said, well, the thing is, the opposite of fear, theologically, is love. And so my first book was thus called Love Over Fear, creating the culture for truly great teaching. And that was the germ of it, really. And in that book, I said we should put students and staff equal first. And that was radical enough in 2015. Gosh, we're not putting students first. So I said, no, we should put staff and students equal first. And then as time went on, and I could see in 2018, the recruitment crisis was beginning. It's in full-blown recruitment crisis now in the UK, but it was beginning then. So I said, we've got to do something better than this. So I really got stuck into some systems, which I articulate in the book, about succession planning and about performance management, which we always call performance development. And then in 2020, I wrote the book with Jonny Uttley, my friend and co-conspirator. Jonny was head of sixth form at Huntington while I was there. I appointed him as head of sixth form. He went on now and is a brilliant, brilliant CEO of a multi-academy trust over in the East Riding. And we wrote the book, Putting Staff First. And we decided on the title just to be radical. You want something that people are going to go, wow, this sounds interesting. So Putting Staff First. And the rationale for putting staff first is really simple. I wrote it based on the instructions you have when you get in an aeroplane. When it says if the oxygen mask comes down, put it on the adults first, because if your adults faint, then the children are lost. And it stops you becoming hypoxic. And that's when you get dizzy and you can't think straight and you lose all control of your senses. So I think we've got schools that are full of hypoxic adults, right? And if you've got hypoxic adults in schools, what chance the children, right? If the adults, we know from what we learned in the pandemic and the lockdown, we know that teaching is a human interaction pursuit, right? It depends on human interaction. And if you've got tired, upset, unmotivated teachers, then that whole relationship, that whole process, that complex process of teaching has no chance of being as good as it can be. So that's behind the book. We have to put staff first, because if you have a happy, healthy, motivated staff who turn up day in, day out, that's the best thing for children's learning.
Yeah. What I heard there was put staff first, because ultimately that will end up making students become first priority.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly what I heard. And so we know nothing is as simple, because I looked at the book and thought put staff first, and that's kind of what made me want to read it and delve in, because it's contrary to common thinking. And there is resistance. And like I was thinking, in our scenario here in the Middle East, most of these schools are for profit.
Yeah.
And they are international private schools run by big corporations who have shareholders and board members and all these other stakeholders who are very much concentrated on making sure the bottom line stays healthy. Now, my question is, how do we put staff first in such an environment where it's so profit driven?
I think there's such an easy answer to this. Right? So I've been thinking, the best companies, the best commercial companies in the world outside of education all have tremendous R&D units, right? Research and development units, right? They're always thinking hard about how do we get the best people to have the best ideas, to get the best product and to increase sales. So from my point of view, the parallels are really clear. One of the things that we found at Huntington, and one of the reasons that we went down the route of putting staff first and became a research school and were evidence-informed and got a really good national reputation, international reputation in some cases for what we do, was because people came to the school because of the repute of the school. So we recruited brilliant people. When I look at the book I wrote, I edited in 2020, which has got 23 chapters on cognitive apprenticeship. The Cognitive Apprenticeship in Action. That was written by 23. Each chapter was written by a member of staff from the school, right? So that's 23 brilliant chapters on how you implement Cognitive Apprenticeship in Action. Well, I had such a brilliant staff, right? And I wasn't worried if our repute meant, and the training meant we lost some people, because we just replaced them with great people, right? And it's a virtuously upward circle. So if you're an independent school, if you're a private school for profit institution, as you describe, right? You want to get the best people in there. You get the best repute. The children will get the best outcomes. Your repute will grow. You'll get more people want to send their children to your school, and profits will just go through the roof, right? If you want to put it like that. In state schools, the profit is the value you add to children's outcomes, and the same for schools. For private schools, it's just that the bottom line is you attract more people in. So, there was 1 year at Huntington where we had 239 places. We only had 160 children in catchment, right, in year 6. 240 places. We got 311 first choices, right? Now that, from all across the city, right? That is where any school would want to be, private or state. Because in the end, the number of children you attract determines what funding you get in both scenarios. So you want great results and great working conditions that attract the best people.
What are they? What are the great working conditions that attract the best people?
Okay, so there are no silly assessments, right? There are only 2 data drops a year rather than 3 or 6, as most people had. We send the children home early every fortnight. So we have 2 hours of training every fortnight, plus all the training days. If you're a middle leader at Huntington, you get 71 hours of ring-fence training time a year, 71 hours of ring-fence training time a year. We only have one objective. We say to you that for your performance management and your pay, you have to unearn your pay rise, right? You will get your pay rise, and as a matter of course, and all we want you to do is work hard on improving your teaching, and we're going to help you do that. Right? We're going to get the best people to help you. We're going to train you. We're going to show you how to use evidence-informed practice. We're going to use one objective, which is an inquiry question. At one point, Professor Jonathan Sharples at the Education Endowment Foundation in London said that what we had at Huntington was globally unique, because every teacher and every TA and every cover supervisor knew all about evidence-informed teaching. They knew what a control group was, a treatment group, and for how to isolate the variable, how to calculate the effect size, right? That's unbelievable. The level of evidence-informed, not evidence-based, but evidence-informed practice was tremendous. If everybody had all the staff, we had 200 odd staff, 120, 110 teachers, everybody would have the right to a day of what we call a family day, right? Fully paid. So if you hadn't seen your old dad and he lived the other side of the country, when you want to have a long weekend, come back on the Tuesday instead of the Monday. Spend some time with your dad. So that was really appreciated, because that's important. And when, of course, you went to all your nativity plays and everything. That was separate to the family day, And so we just treated people like people, right? We just treated people with humanity. And one of the things it didn't mean was a really soft, cuddly approach, right? I expected a lot from people. I expected them to work hard. We were going to give them a lot. And I expected a lot back. So I expected people to be really committed. But I also, importantly, led by example in terms of putting family first. My most famous blog post is called Why Putting Family First Matters. And it tells the story of how I realised when I was teaching an A-level English class that I'd missed my son growing up. It's really famous. And I was teaching Death of a Salesman. We hadn't got very long. And I got an A-level class of about 15 people. And I said, let's watch the film first, the Malkovich film first. And near the end of the play, I don't know if you know the play, it was a lovely play. Willie Loman, great name, is retirement age, he's 60, and he fights with his son Biff. They roll around on the floor, and as they're fighting, Biff kisses him, just holds him tight, and kisses his dad. And it was Dustin Hoffman was playing Willie Loman. We were watching the film, right? I said, let's watch the film. We haven't got much time. We'll get a sense of the story. And we were watching the film, and I wasn't just tearing up. I was bawling. I was properly crying, sobbing. I had to run out. I ran out into this English office, and Judy, one of the TAs, gave me some tissues. She had no idea what was going on. And so I wrote this. So the next day I went into the classroom, took my dad's alarm clock. My dad was a postman all his life from the age of 14, got up at 4 a.m. every morning and died at the age of 57 of cancer and never retired and never tended roses like he wanted to. And it's up there now on the shelf. I have his alarm clock, which got him up every morning as a symbol for me of my dad having no choice, having left school at 14 with no qualifications. He had no choice of what he had to do in life. And I said, look, what was going on when I cried yesterday was I was thinking about my son, that I've missed. My son's now 15 and I've missed him growing up. I've worked so hard. And there's, I know why I went into education because of my dad. And I made a decision 12, 13 years ago in that moment that whenever my boys asked me to do something, I'd do it no matter what, no matter how much work I had. If they asked me to go and kick a ball about, I would go and kick a ball about. And I've stuck fiercely to that ever since. And about 3 years later, Joe had his mates round again because I was so miserable. He stopped bringing his mates round. We really made up. We really got close again. And he had his mates round and they were laughing around. And I wrote this blog about it and about the experience. And Joe eventually let me publish it. And Jeff Barton was keen, who's the head of ASCL, was keen for me to publish it. And I published it at 6 o'clock on a Sunday evening. It had 19,999 views by midnight, right? So in the first 6 hours, it had gone viral. It's had about 150,000 views. And I had someone a couple of weeks ago come up to me and say, you changed my life. When I read that, you absolutely changed my life. So it's really important as well to practice what you preach and put your family first. Because what I've learned now, Leisa, and it's really interesting, is at the end of it all, you imagine 18 years of headship, 36 results days, 18 budgets during the biggest cuts to state funding ever, right? And I've had some pretty tricky times. What I've realized now, right at the end of it all, and I'm doing some lovely stuff, is you have to hold two completely contradictory, competing ideas about your work in balance at the same time. The first one is, it really matters. These kids get one chance. These children, yes, what we do is fundamentally important to their lives, really matters what we do. And the other side of it is, it doesn't matter at all. Doesn't matter at all. Once you're gone, you're gone. Now, people say, what was his name? John? Does it Tom? He had big nose and grey hair, and they don't forget. And it goes, and it doesn't really matter, right? So I've been lucky to have a really good philosophy about stuff, and it is imbued. It affected everything we've done. And so that's what it's like to work at Huntington. And I love the idea. My concept of headship is that you create a set of values and a way of doing things, and you're a guardian of those values, and you just pass those values on, right? I don't believe in head teachers coming in to make their mark. When they come in and they change the uniform, they change the MIS, they just all the superficial stuff because I'm here, right? That's rubbish. Just pass the values on from one generation to the next, from one guardian to the next, and that's headship.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Loved that story, by the way. Wow. Yeah,
it's in the back of my first book. But you can find it on the blog. If you're putting family first matter, Why Putting Family First Matters, John Tomsett is the blog.
Yeah, I will have a look for that and see if I can put that in as a link and people can read that. I love that. And it resonated massively with me when I stepped away from being the academic head of a big enough school in Elaine in 2018 was similar. No, I didn't have the cry moment, but I have two sons, twins, and I realized I was like up at nights and working and working and working. And I loved what I did. You know, I was starting and doing reform and really pioneering stuff, because when you come into a country and you're asked to do something, you really want to do it with all your might, because one, you think in your head, is what I thought anyway, I want to leave a legacy. I want to come to this country and really put my mark. They've called me all the way over here. I'm running this massive school. It's an experiment. For the first time, we're putting boys and girls together in a Muslim country in the same classroom. They gave me this brand new, humongous school with swimming pool for the first time. I had to schedule boys swimming and girls swimming, and when do they go? And we can't have them clashing, and we have to get them together in the same classroom. And I have to deal with the parents who are like, no, boys and girls at a certain age should not be together. And, you know, and all these things. And I realized my entire life was about the school. Like I lived Al Shaheen school. I breathed everything. And then one day I was like, but I have these boys and I wanted them more than I wanted life itself, you know? And so it's radical, but I stopped. I literally just stopped and just said, you know what? I love education. I don't have to go too far from it. I can still work in education, but I don't have to be in a school, and I don't have to give up the privilege of raising my boys and being fully present. And so, I exited, but I'm still very much entrenched in everything education because of my new role that I took on with Teach Middle East. So the whole story really resonated with me, because if you miss the years, now they're going into secondary school, they're going into year 7 in September. And I'm happy that I'm able to see their development and be mommy and be present and make them lunch and, you know, do fun stuff with them and not be so tired. Because, you know, at that time, my 3-4-year-old, they always used to say, don't disturb mommy. She's in her office and mommy is tired. I'm like, gosh, that's not what I want my kids to remember.
No, it's interesting. I got so many responses to that blog post. And one I remember from a woman who said, my mum used to be a primary head teacher, and my brother and I called them the chicken Kiev years. But she'd rush in, pop a chicken Kiev in the oven, lob it on the table and be off again. You know, and she said, and your blog, she said, my mum's just retired and I'm going on holiday next week. And your blog has helped me understand what she was doing and why she was doing it. And I'm going to go on holiday with her and settle things and make my peace.
Yeah.
And forgive, or almost forgive, you know, just say, I understand now.
Brilliant. I think we've shot over a time, but I've really loved this chat so much. I have a question to ask, though, for schools that are looking to become research-informed schools, especially international schools that want to really be true to that ethos. Yeah. Where do they start? How do they start that journey?
I would go on to the Education Endowment Foundation website, and I would go on to look at their guidance reports. They've got a wealth of stuff on there, which is fabulous. The guidance reports, really brilliant implementation guide by Jonathan Sharples is a seminal read. It's a crucial read. So if you begin there, you can't go far wrong. And I've been massively influenced by them for my whole career. Well, for the last decade of my career, which has been great.
Brilliant. John, thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Leisa.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I will put the links. Just send me the links. We'll drop them in the show notes. And people, please do check out his books. Go read his blog. I'm going to put that link to that particular blog article for everybody to read. And I'm sure you'll find great value. It's been my pleasure having you on the podcast.
It's been a treat. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Teach Middle East podcast. Visit our website, teachmiddleeast.com, and follow us on social media. The links are in the show notes.